dedication, passion, hard work, and love. That's how the Ali dynasty enlightens us to this day. Motivated by the greatest Muhammad Ali, his family comprises individuals who have devoted their lives to various causes, while Rasheda Ali, an elite activist and social worker, continues to inspire people. Her son, Nico Ali Walsh, is a hero to youngsters. Walking in his grandfather's footsteps, Nico Ali Walsh is now a professional boxer who has combat skills instilled in his blood. Despite the media and legacy pressure, the mother-son duo has impressed everyone with their passion and perseverance. As an advocate of healthcare, an entertainer, or as a fighter, the pair of Rasheda Ali and Nico Ali Walsh has influenced communities on and off the camera. Join us on ES Fancast as we sit down with them to discuss their inspiring journey, memories of Muhammad Ali, the inside family stories, and much more about their specific roles.
Hey there, welcome to the ES Fancast, stories from insiders for the fans, an immersive interview experience that gets you, the fan, a peek inside the world, your favorite stars, like never before. Fancast gets you front row seats to your favorite athletes and teams, interact with stars, answer polls, and explore our content-rich feed. Well, today we're going to sit down with not one, but two very special guests who've been surrounded by greatness right since the very beginning. They've earned numerous feats to be proud of, and they are still very humble through it all. I'm your host, Kenny Ducey, and today we have none other than Rasheeda Ali Walsh and her son, Nico Ali Walsh. Rasheeda, an author, entrepreneur, medical advocate, and celebrity. She's devoted her entire life to helping the needy, and Nico is creating his own identity as a rising professional boxer, carry on the legacy of the great Muhammad Ali. So, guys, welcome to the show. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on here.
It's a pleasure to be chatting with you guys. And Rasheeda, I just got to ask you right off the bat, you've done so many things in this life, and you're in multiple avenues, whether it be business, charity work, or being a mother. How hard is it to do all of this at the same time? It seems impossible to be this involved in so many different fields.
Well, first of all, thanks for having us on the show. I've always been really good at multitasking. So if I'm not doing two or three things at once, I'm not as efficient. So I really love my work in television and film and advocacy with Parkinson's, but I'm most fulfilled with my role as a parent and a wife. And I take that role very seriously, and I put that role above all others. So and who says you can't have it all?
That's a good point. You really can if you put your mind to it and work hard enough. Nico, I mean, you mentioned motherhood. Rasheeda, Nico, what was your mom like growing up in terms of her parenting style? I mean, how important was she in your life to becoming who you are today?
She was super strict growing up. My dad was more of the softy, and my brother would tell you guys probably the same, but my mom was known as the hammer. She was very strict growing up, but if she wasn't that way, then I wouldn't be who I am today. So I'm very grateful.
Well, Rasheeda, between Nico and Biaggio, who was the toughest growing up in the house?
Well, that's kind of easy. They both equally tested our patience. So, they both get under our skin, and Nico was really good at that because he would negotiate all the time. It was out of getting in trouble. He would kind of negotiate. But Biaggio, later on, I found out that he was way more mischievous and curious. He did more things behind our back. And so I found out later that, oh, you did that. But now watching them live their dream and becoming incredibly passionate athletes and dedicated to their sport. And more importantly, out of the ring, just becoming just kind, compassionate human beings is the most rewarding feeling I've ever felt.
I mean, it's certainly proud to grow up and see your children achieve so many things. So I certainly understand that. Now, Nico, your brother Biaggio, he was here a couple of weeks back. He said he would beat you in an MMA match, but you would beat him in a boxing match. I'm assuming you would prefer to box him and not fight him in an MMA cage. But who do you think would win in a hypothetical fight? I'm sure that I know the answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you have to, like, with any matchup, you got to pick the person with the most experience. So I would of course pick myself, but I think he would also. It's just, he's new in the field of fighting, so all it takes is time, like experience. You cannot recreate experience. Like you could see the years of people who, like, for example, with boxing, like I could see fighting a dude who's been boxing for 10 years versus fighting a dude who's been boxing for even 8 years. That, like, you could see the difference. Just time is everything.
Well, Rasheeda, what do you think about that assessment? Do you think that that's accurate?
I totally agree with that 100%. I mean, nothing can compare to experience. And it's not just sparring and in the gym. I mean, experience in an actual fight. So that's where you're getting all of your tools. I know you're learning when you're training in with your coaches in the comfort of your gym, but when you're actually in a fight, that's where you're getting all of your knowledge. And as you get more and more fights, that's how you get better.
Well, speaking of fights, and one that was a few years back now, Nico, you wore your grandfather's trunks, obviously, and you talked about how it
Yeah.
was an honor and a lot to step into. I mean, just what was that experience like? What I'm sure it was well, I don't know if it was an easy decision, but what went into the decision? Just how are you feeling out there? And years later, do you feel like you're maybe stepping into your own trunks in a way?
Yeah, no, I felt in a weird way that wearing his trunks was me stepping into my own trunks. I wasn't supposed to wear his trunks anyway. I never planned on that, but like, if you don't know, like, the little story of it was, I wanted to wear white with black trim because that's what all the old school fighters used to wear. That's what my grandfather wore, and I'm an old school guy. Sugar Ray Robinson wore those colored trunks, so I wanted to be like those guys. And I had Everlast making Nico trunks, that were white and black, but they told me, like, hey, they might not be ready in time because they were shipping it to Tulsa, which is where my first fight was. That's where my pro debut was. So just in case, my trainer at the time, Sugar Hill, was like, bring an extra pair of white and black trunks just in case they don't have your Nico trunks. And I said to him that the only other pair of white and black trunks I have, like, in existence, are my grandfather's trunks. I said, I'm not going to actually wear those trunks, but I'll bring it just in case, just because he was like, just bring them just in case. So I brought them, and it turns out that my Everlast trunks that were getting made were not ready in time. So I ended up having to try on my grandfather's trunks the night before the fight, and I went through with it.
Sorry, I was muting my microphone because it's very noisy here in New York City. That
No
happens from
problem.
time to time on these shows. But yeah, I mean, let's stick with boxing here, Nico, because your career's been very catchy since the very beginning. A lot of great people supporting you. One person, Mike Tyson. What has he meant to you and your family, and just how cool is it to have him, kind of co-sign your career a little bit?
It's amazing. It's not important to me that, I mean, I wouldn't say it's not important, but it's what's most important to me was that he didn't jump onto my career when I turned pro, because when I turned pro, the world now is getting alerted of my career. So you can have bandwagon people from anywhere. I know millions of different people who didn't follow me back then who are following me now. But Mike Tyson followed me back when nobody cared about me back in the amateurs. Like, he went to my third ever amateur fight when I was like 15 or something, and he showed up, and it was just him and my family in the seats. Like, we had a small little video of it. There were empty seats everywhere. No one cared. I was just an amateur fighter, but Mike Tyson showed up, and so I appreciate that so much, and I have so much respect for him and his wife. Uh, yeah, it's just, they're amazing people to know.
I mean, Rasheeda, what does it mean to you and your family that, Mike would support you guys like that and be such a champion for him?
It's a huge honor. I've known Mike for since high school, so I've known Mike a long time. He's been in my father's life. They're good friends. He's always been very kind and supportive of our family. I'm, now seeing that Mike, throughout the years, he stayed in contact with my dad. And then when we moved to Vegas, we connected again with Mike. And then he became kind of a role model and a inspiration for my kids who are clearly boxers. But it's been kind of a huge honor for someone like Mike, who's gone through so much with in his life, to be able to embrace the boys and in their careers.
Where do you guys think he ranks among the greatest boxers of all time?
I think
Wow.
Mike's amazing. He's one of the greatest heavyweights, but I wouldn't put him above my grandfather, but that's a biased question.
Well,
I
Mike wouldn't put himself above Daddy.
No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't. He never has. He never has.
Well, Mike was
but if,
one of the guys that I would follow. After my dad fighting, it was hard to I used to follow my dad, obviously, because he was my father, and then following the Spartans that he worked with, like Frazier and Foreman and all the greats, Liston. But then after that era was over, I was a huge fan of Mike Tyson. I would watch all his fights. He was just that damn dynamic and interesting.
Yeah, he was certainly one of the most charismatic boxers of all time for sure, and then one of the greats. But so you would assume, or you would safely say he's probably in the top 5, maybe not better than your grandfather, Nico, but
in terms of I love heavyweights, so it's hard to rank someone like my new favorite fighter, like Canelo or Naoya Inoue, these guys that are fighting today. It's hard to rank them among a Mike Tyson or my grandfather. So we'll stick to just heavyweights. Absolutely, he's top 5 all time.
Yeah, that's very fair. Nico,
Yeah.
you're speaking of present day boxers, and I'm curious as a boxer yourself, do you feel as though because of your name that people are trying to, people would like to fight you because they think it would look good on their resume? Maybe do you feel like you get your opponent's best shot because of your name, or do you think that once you step into that ring, all of that is pushed aside and it's just two guys boxing?
No, you're right. With the first one, it's like I get the absolute best version of my opponents. Like with every single every single fight I've had where I've been able to watch footage of my opponent, they look a certain way on the footage before my fight, and then during the fight they look better. And then I seen fights of opponents after my fight, and then they look back to where they did before. Like they show up when they're fighting me because this is their one chance, once in a lifetime deal. So yeah, I get the best version of every guy I fight, and but it makes me work harder, so I'm glad.
But do you feel like that's helpful for you because you're never going to get a guy on his worst day and then maybe just skate by or get lucky in a match? Would you rather have it this way?
Yeah, no, I'll never get lucky in a match, and I've always been the type to pick the hardest route instead of the easiest. So I'm glad it's this way, because if it was the opposite and I got like the worst of everyone I fought, it wouldn't be as fun to watch me fight. It wouldn't be fun to watch me beat up a bunch of guys who don't want to fight me. So it's better with what it is now.
Now, I just want to switch gears for just a very brief moment about the business side of things with you guys. Rasheeda, you are obviously a great entrepreneur. We mentioned at the top, you've done so much in this life already. You've worked on big brands projects. How do you see marketing today in today's day and age as someone who's worked in media? I guess where were you inspired to enter the business world and work in all these different areas?
Well, my parents they were in entertainment. So my dad was a fighter, but he was also an entertainer. My mother was a performing artist. So they inspired me to get into the world of communications. And so they were self-marketers before they were even marketing companies or branding companies for fighters. So they inspired me to get into the world of, journalism and marketing. And I really enjoyed that world. And of course, I delved into performing arts because I love to perform as well. But it's just interesting how media and the world has changed, where we saw my dad, where he was the first to do it in the sports marketing arena. It's so different now with the social media and just the ability to be able to, in 1 second, get all over the globe, where my dad did it old school, where he was in the papers and on the radio, but he was still considered a global figure. because he made his fights interesting. He stood against the government. He had strong convictions, and people just wanted to watch him. He was very interesting to watch.
Well, Rasheeda, as someone who's seen, obviously, as you mentioned, the papers and, going on TV, going on the radio, are there any tips for people who are marketing in today's day and age through the internet, through just, massive outreach online that perhaps, we've lost over the years, because we used to, there used to be a lot more effort, I think, that went into marketing when it was so hard to reach people. Is there any advice you would give people that maybe they're not following right now that you picked up when you were working in traditional media outlets, trying to get, marketing out?
Well, I've learned traditionally when athletes broke into the world of their sport, respectively, they just had to be good at what they did, and that was it. Now you can't just be good in your sport. You have to also connect to your audience. So most promoters and business managers and agents will say, you got to connect to your public. You need to have an Instagram. You need to have a TikTok. You need to get on there. And so now it's an added responsibility for these, for these athletes who really weren't YouTubers, and they weren't really connected to their phones like most people who were in the fashion industry. So now they had to break off into a brand new world of marketing that they weren't comfortable with. And that's unfortunate because, well, it's a good thing because, you can actually get your name out a lot faster, but also you're actually having to learn a whole nother skill that is literally a whole different world.
Well, Nico, speaking of being on social and building your brand, you have an OnlyFans. Now, I know that that's sort of a hot button topic for a lot of people because of the most of the people who actually use OnlyFans. But as a tennis fan, I know Nick Kyrgios just signed up for the site, and is sort of using it as its intended consequence, or intended purpose rather, which is to give people a behind the scenes look. I mean, do you get strange looks when people ask, why do you have an OnlyFans, and how has the experience been working with them and connecting with your audience and actually showing them your training and all that stuff?
Yeah, no, of course I get weird looks, but it's only for people who don't know, because OnlyFans has so many demographics. Like they got comedians on there, they've got actors and athletes and golfers. It's crazy. The amount of people that they have on there is awesome, but they're amazing to work with. They're super easy to work with, and they make it easy for me to, I don't know, just share myself on the platform. And the people that follow my OnlyFans are people who are into boxing, people who want to see my inside scoops with boxing, like, stuff that I don't use Instagram and Twitter a lot. I don't use TikTok enough. Like, I wouldn't be posting the stuff that I post on OnlyFans on those open platforms. On OnlyFans, I kind of talk about when I'm cutting weight, or when I'm just weighing in, when I'm about to fight, like stuff like that. So OnlyFans is a super cool platform.
You're not on TikTok though? You're not scrolling you haven't been caught yet? You haven't caught the TikTok bug?
No, so TikTok is my favorite of all the platforms, but not for the purpose of my boxing and stuff. Like I'll go on TikTok and just look at funny videos. That's how I'll waste my time, when I'm not doing anything. I'll just look at funny videos. But for the purpose of boxing and like marketing, what you were talking about, I don't use it enough. Like I don't post a lot of TikToks. So, I could be better on all platforms, but TikTok's definitely a favorite. You learn so much through TikTok. If the algorithm catches that you want to learn about a certain thing, boxing or I don't know, anything, it'll start showing those videos more. So you can use TikTok to, just benefit yourself. It doesn't have to all be bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's also a little different making content for that platform as opposed to, the traditional outlets that we're used to, like you said. So it's sometimes there's a lot more people like you, like me, that are just pretty much consuming and not really creating the content. But just putting a bow on it, Rasheeda, as a mother, who sees this, like how hard is it from your view as an athlete to, or be an athlete these days when you have to maintain a social media presence, you have to market yourself on there. You also have to, interact with your fans or deal with what people are saying about you from the outside? Like, is that a lot of pressure in your estimation, or how do you view being an athlete in today's day and age with social media?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of pressure, definitely. Like I said, even content creators, it's a full-time job. Even if you're just a content creator and you don't have anything else outside of like, fashion, it's a full-time job. And people get paid a lot of money to be able to produce as many videos and share with their public. As an athlete, you have to carve out some of your training time to be able to create this content that you're not familiar with, or you get someone to do it for you, or it is a whole completely different animal, which could be good for a lot of these athletes because they can open a door to a world that some people who may not watch boxing, they may kind of, hey, I'll check out, some of these guys' fights because I saw him on TikTok or I saw him on Instagram, and hey, I think he's cool. So it could be a good thing, but it's very challenging as an athlete to be able to catch up to the fast pace of the social media world.
Now, Nico, I want to ask you, because you were handed your first loss. You did come back and win in December, but I want to ask how the emotions were processing that loss, going through that as a as obviously a fighter and someone with a great carrying on a great legacy. I'm sure you're never expecting to go in and fight, or excuse me, go in and fight and lose. But how did you deal with that in the immediate hours and days following?
Um, it's so weird. The loss fight didn't affect me mentally. Like it didn't put me out or anything like that. I wasn't like any sort of way about it. Because I didn't feel like I lost, and then I didn't get beat up in the fight or anything like that. So it didn't feel in my heart like a loss. Truly, the fight before that, I had a draw that ended up being a no contest because the dude tested positive for PEDs and stuff. That felt more gut wrenching, hearing about like that he tested positive and that stuff. That I took hard because I was just like, I worked so hard just for someone to cheat like that. So that felt terrible. That felt worse than an actual loss. So, but in terms of like the loss when it comes to records and stuff like that, records are for DJs. That's the famous saying. So I don't really care much for boxing records anymore. I'm really concerned with every fight putting on a great performance. So I think this year every fight will get better and better and better and better. So I'm not really concerned with that fight in particular.
Well, I don't want to get yourself in trouble, but do you have do you have any thoughts on how the testing process is going in boxing, and maybe ways it
Yeah,
could improve?
of course, of course. Yeah, no, I think just talking about this stuff is improving it. But they've got from my understanding, they've got VADA testing, which is something that I guess the camps they can discuss and allow the camps to test each other. But for someone like me who's not fighting at a title level or contender level, that the testing isn't really looked at my level. So, but because I fought under the Devin Haney Lomachenko card, it was my first fight on a pay per view. They tested for that fight, and it was here in Vegas, and the Nevada Commission is super strict. But in boxing in general, I think everyone should get tested. I don't think that you should leave it up for when you're only fighting on pay-per-views or when you're only fighting in Nevada. I think everyone should be getting tested. And I don't think it should just be fight night. I think you should test maybe once, maybe even twice during the camp because the camp is can be up to 10 weeks. I've had 10-week camps before. That's more than enough time to take, I mean, like take steroids or just performance enhancers and then get off of it and then fight and then have it test negative. So I think you should test in the camp and before the fight.
Yeah, I think a lot of people wouldn't know about that process. I certainly didn't, and that
I had to
definitely would
learn
be
once I found
logical.
out about, the stuff I did my research.
Yeah, it would seem logical what you've laid out, that not testing every fight, making sure that you're testing while players or boxers are in camp. I think that would make a lot of
Yeah.
sense. So Hopefully they hear you. Hopefully they're watching the ES Fancast. And we appreciate you guys being here with us today. Rashida, I want to ask, just going back to Nico, and when he did lose that fight. I mean, your father was one of the best at shaking off defeat or just disappointment in his career. I mean, how in your view of him and in your estimation, how did he do that so well? What were some of the tricks that he used to move on and, take in that doubt and just get rid of it, right? Because I think that's something that I think all the greatest athletes of all time all share, is that I was watching the Novak Djokovic's interview recently on 60 Minutes, and he was saying, the interviewer was asking, well, how do you not feel pressure? How do you not feel doubt? And he's like, I feel it, and but I let it enter my mind. I deal with it, and I push it away. So, did your father have any tricks like that to, sort of stay focused and stay positive and continue to go on despite disappointment?
Yeah, Kenny. My dad, like all the greats, they used the loss and defeat as a tool to push them further and make them better, make them stronger, make them faster. So my dad was really, really good at using those losses and pushing him and making him better. And he did, in fact, come back a stronger, better athlete. One thing my dad was very, very good at was he put the past in the past. I'm still trying to learn that from him. So when I talk to Daddy about certain things, he's really, really, really talented in being able to put the past where it belongs and move forward. So if we can take a page out of my dad's book in that respect, I think we could all learn a little bit more about keeping the past in the past and moving forward. Because if we hang on to things and defeats and things that we weren't proud of, even as just human beings, we can never move forward. So I have to take my hats off to my dad for being able to put things into perspective and move on.
Or to believe in himself against all odds, as you once said. You regretted, not asking him how he did that. But how do you feel as though he was? You also went on to say in that interview that he faced a lot of drastic challenges. How did he deal with that? How tough was it on him to be not only an African American living in this country, but a Muslim as well?
Yeah, my dad used and again, as an African American dealing in America at its peak in racism, he dealt firsthand living. He's from the South, so of course he had racism, blatant racism thrown at him in his face. Faith was what my dad used to be able to overcome all of those challenges, because he was challenged more than anyone that I know, and for him to take those challenges head on, holding on to his faith and his conviction in his religion, that's what, in my opinion, made my dad the GOAT. Because he, in the face of all of this hate and diversity and just rampant racism against his people and his religion, he took it all in stride. He held on to his faith. He didn't let it change him. And again, he moved on, inspiring others to do the same.
I mean, Nico, maybe it's not quite as vicious as what your grandfather faced, but how do you deal with, I'm sure you have, because you are pop and you probably have haters. How do you deal with that, online when you see people just, call out your boxing style, whatever it is, and how tough is that to take in, or maybe you like it?
I don't like it unless it's like funny. I've gotten some funny comments where they were super insulting, but they were funny. So you gotta respect those ones.
Like what? Like what?
There was one. There was one that said, I'll just right off the top of my head, because I'm super light skinned and I always get comments about just my complexion compared to my grandfather's or whatever. So they said some comment was like, talking about me, they said that's not Cassius Clay, that's Caucasian Clay. And I get comments like that all the time. And those ones are funny. So I love reading those ones. But when it comes to the real, like the spiteful ones for no reason, like the ones that talk about my boxing, whatever, they only bother me if I believe what they're saying. So most of the time they do not bother me. But I think the people that really care or get bothered by these hateful comments, they must have some sort of belief in the comment. Like the doubt that people have for me is not the doubt that I have for myself. So it's not, I don't really care much for most of the comments.
Well, I mean, speaking of commenting, and one of the things that's popular nowadays in boxing is calling people out.
Yeah.
Now, Jake Paul recently called out your brother. Do you feel as though it would be a fight that he should fight or would need to fight? And how did you take that?
I think that'd be a really bad look for Jake Paul, because my brother's an MMA fighter. So I think he would be his last fight was against a legitimate boxer. And I was like, wow, I commend Jake for this. So he would be regressing if he fought not only my brother who's an MMA fighter, but someone who hasn't been fighting long. Like Jake's been boxing longer than Biaggio's been in MMA. So he would be regressing. He shouldn't do that, no.
Well, I'm actually curious while we're talking about him. I mean, how do you feel as though he does progress in his career, Jake Paul? I mean, how like if you were him or you were advising him, like what are the ways that he can continue to get better? Because obviously it seemed like he would pick a less bad fighter every time, and then he would continue to win. And like, how
Yeah.
where does his career go from here, basically? Because honestly, like just being objective, at least, I'm not a boxing expert, but it does feel as though he does have talent. He does work hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, but where does he go from here?
I know exactly the answer to this question. If I was in control of his career, it would. So first of all, the mold that he's in right now is that whole YouTuber influencer. It's what do they call it? Crossover boxing. They call it crossover boxing. So he's stuck in that mold. Everyone, like the majority of the boxing world, views him as that. So he would have to break out of that mold. His last fight was against a no-name fighter who's in his weight class, which he would have to keep making fights like that to progress. But if he went that long route, the route that I'm taking, where I'm fighting nobodies, but I'm like building in the ranks slowly, slowly, slowly. If he did that and he fought for a title one day, the amount of money he would make is enormous, because he would have at that point been able to prove himself as not just an influencer or a YouTuber or whatever. He would have been able to say, hey, look, I took X amount of fights with nobodies, not on TV or not whatever. And then now he's fighting not a Canelo, but like someone in his weight. Canelo's not even in his weight. He's I think he's a cruiserweight. He's almost a heavyweight. So I mean, if he takes that route, the long route, the annoying route, that's not immediately gratifying, he could do it. I mean, if he's got it in him.
I think of Tim Tebow trying to play baseball for the New York Mets and riding the bus in the minor leagues as one of the most successful college football
Yep.
quarterbacks of all time. So yeah, I mean, you're college football players. So I mean, I think you're right that would certainly be a good path to just grind it out. Continue to be a legitimate fighter. Before we move off of today's boxing figures, I do want to ask you both about Floyd Mayweather calling himself greater than Muhammad Ali. I mean, I'm assuming that you do not agree. Mike Tyson does not agree. But I don't know. How do you feel as though they stack up in terms of their legacies in the ring, anyway?
You go
Well,
ahead,
I,
Mom.
I'm gonna I'm gonna steal my dad's quote, the quote that he told Frazier, where he said, you know, if you whoop me, you'll have to wake up and apologize. So I'll just say to Floyd that if he thought he was the greatest, he would have to wake up and apologize. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I don't know. I don't obviously don't think he's better than my grandfather, but I don't know if he thinks that. I think when he said those things, he was at I mean, I think that was during the Manny Pacquiao time, like when he was fighting Manny Pacquiao. So he's still in his career, really. Like he's still having exhibitions and stuff. It took until Mike Tyson in his heyday thought he could destroy anybody on earth. That's how you're supposed to think when you're a fighter. But when Mike Tyson got older, he became more humble and realized, like, hey, I bow down my hat to the greats before me, this and that. I think Floyd will get there eventually. He's not there right now, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think time works on everybody, and eventually,
Yeah.
you mature and you get older and you have perspective, and that's how life works. So we'll see what happens down the road. But yeah, I mean, so I just speaking of life and how things move, just to get serious for a second, Rashida, one of your big projects in life is Parkinson's disease awareness. You wrote a children's book about Parkinson's disease, which was I thought very unique and helpful and important. How was that disease impactful on your life as a kid, witnessing that? And I guess I'm assuming that was where you took inspiration to write that book and to help other children that might be, their families might be affected by Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, so when my dad was diagnosed, I was probably in junior high, so I was very young when I found out about this incurable disease. And so we were taken aback by it because we didn't know how to grasp it, especially being so young. And my dad was still trying to learn how to still work with this condition. So for all of us as a family, it was a lot for us to grasp because we didn't know what the future was going to be like. And so I didn't really have questions with Parkinson's because I saw that my dad was normal. He was still working. He was still kind of talking a little bit. He was still being able to make an income. So I wasn't as alarmed. And my dad collectively inspired me to write a book to help other kids and other families dealing with a young Parkinsonian because my dad was youngly diagnosed with Parkinson's. And so learning about it, reading about it, doing research, it made my children a lot more understanding about what their grandfather's going through. And it just became, I think they became a lot more compassionate and loving as human beings.
Well, with the obviously the health problems, did you consider not letting your children, not only enter boxing or combat sports, but football or any sort of sports with danger to your health like that? And I mean, Nico as well. I mean, did you consider not wanting to enter boxing because of the health problems that it can pose or historically has posed, or was that something that you felt you wanted to do regardless?
I mean,
I said
I
no.
know what she's gonna say.
What am I
She
going to
didn't.
say, Nico?
She didn't want me to start boxing. But I think that goes without saying. I don't think any parent would want their kid to start boxing. But I think my only fear at the start of boxing was like Parkinson's and stuff because like there's still a lot we don't know about it. But I know that it's like genetic. Like I had multiple people in my family who weren't related to my grandfather who had Parkinson's. So it was very weird. That was my only fear to start.
I told Biagio that he wanted to, Biagio and Nico both were in flag football when they were young. And then when Beige wanted to, you know, escalate to tackle, I said, absolutely not. So I said no until you get older, maybe high school. But I didn't even want him to do it then because I just didn't like the whole high impact hitting. And he just happened to be good at it. And so, of course, I got to a point where they got to a level where they can make their own decisions. I can't say you can't do that at a certain age. So since I couldn't talk them out of it, I just became a support for them, but just keeping them healthy and safe, going to see neurologists, making sure there's baseline testing, as much as I could do in my position.
Well, I mean, at least in today's day and age, though, I mean, maybe we can't say quite the same for football. I mean, I think it's gotten certainly a little bit better, but probably still tough on players' health. But I mean, in boxing, do you feel both again for both of you? Do you feel as though there have been steps that have been taken to make it a safer sport in recent years?
Yeah,
Um,
I do think. Don't you think, Nico? There's safer guidelines now than there used to be.
yeah, I just think with boxing, it's like it's hard. You're never gonna make it a safe sport, but like to make it safer, yes, there have been situations. I mean, like The biggest thing that comes off the top of my mind is that like they used to have 15-round fights back in my grandfather's days, and now they switched it to 12, and that was because of health reasons. But the biggest thing today that I see is making boxing better is the refs. The refs are
Mhm.
stopping the fights when when they know that the opponent is not going to, you know, win the fight, and if they proceed that they could be getting damaging only their health. So I've seen fights get stopped and people are like, "Oh, it's an early stoppage," but I side with the refs on on early stoppages because I think they're only protecting the fighter.
Well, I mean, before I do want to talk a little bit more about current day boxing, but just before we get
Yeah.
off the topic, especially of your book, Rasheeda, I just wanted to ask, how I guess hard, if it was hard at all to write that book, and where you feel as though your work in outreach and spreading awareness about Parkinson's, and really all we're doing to try to develop a cure. I mean, how have you seen that progress ever since you entered the field and tried to help with Parkinson's, and writing that book especially? What was that experience like?
Well, it was a wonderful, gratifying experience because my dad wrote the foreword, and my children actually they wrote the questions. So questions that are in my book is more of a guide than like a novel, a book, because the questions in the book are questions that all kids will want to ask about their grandparents or parents or loved ones dealing with Parkinson's. So it was a collective joint effort. The cover of the book was handwritten by Biaggio. So it felt really nice and therapeutic to be able to embrace Parkinson's and talk about it collectively as a family. And it was a project that I can work on with my dad. So that was kind of cool. But I didn't realize it was going to help so many people. So it was translated in so many different languages like French and Spanish, and the Euro version, in Australia, it was sent all over the world because there were people who really wanted to know what is going on with their loved ones, but they wanted in not a scientific term, but more of a layman's easy, simple terms. And I think my book was able to do that.
I mean, yeah, I mean that's it. I'm glad to hear it has a very profound impact all around the world, because it definitely, the concept is I think unique, and it's also something that for sure would I think would be helpful to a child and to a parent as well. And speaking of your guys' family, Nico, I did want to ask about your aunt Layla Ali, obviously one of the greatest boxers of all time. We're talking a lot here about your journey in boxing, and maybe what both of you have drawn from your grandfather, but specifically Layla, Nico. I mean, what have you learned from watching her fight and talking to her?
Well, she was going to my amateur fights back in the day. So I knew back then, like she said the same thing that I've already said, where you get the best version of your opponent just because they're facing an Ali. And no one will be able to understand that. Like no normal boxer will be able to know what that feels like, but she was able to. So she said that back in the day. I felt it back then, but I really feel it now. Because a professional fight is totally different than an amateur fight.
And Rasheeda, speaking of Layla Ali, I mean, where do you feel as though I mean, and Nico, you can answer as well if you have an opinion, but where do you feel as though the future of boxing, women's boxing lies? And do you feel like it's got a bright future ahead? And where does it fit into the boxing world?
Well, in the 90s, when Layla first wanted to embrace boxing, of course, my dad was like, no, 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 because first he grew up in a time where women didn't just really embrace those, high impact, dangerous sports. But he also wanted to protect his daughter. So as a father, any father was like, no, I don't want you to box. That's very normal. But then when he saw that she was very serious about this sport, that she took it seriously, she was very adamant, she had the right trainers around her, she really, really loved it. Then he embraced her, and then she started winning and winning, and then she became undefeated. And so then he was like, okay, I feel more confident now that you're doing well at this sport. But I think in the 90s, even then, they weren't televising women's boxing back then. And now they've taken leaps and bounds. Now they can do more for female boxing and other female sports, but they have, since Layla started, leaps and bounds better as far as getting paid what they deserve and getting the coverage that they deserve as well.
Now, I want to ask about today's boxing world as we're talking about the climate for, maybe the women's side of boxing. Do you guys think, and this for both of you guys, do you think that in today's day and age, or how do you think Muhammad Ali would have fared in today's day and age? Do you think he would have been more dominant given the fewer rounds and as you were mentioning, Nico, the early stoppages, or do you think there are some challenges that boxing in the present day would pose? Because obviously it is a unique sport in the sense that it might be easier for him now, but a lot of sports, the way the game evolves, some of the legends, even of just 30 years ago may be overmatched with the new technology and, how the new medicine and how fit these athletes are now. So how do you feel as though he would fit in today?
I think he would be just as great today. I think he would be great in any era of boxing. The difference, I mean, the problem I have with people always glorifying old school boxers is that there's a lot of old school boxers that we have a ton of respect for and they paved the way, but they're not beating certain boxers today. It's not happening. And I'm not going to say names or anything like that, but there's old school boxers that wouldn't stand a chance with some of these boxers today. But my grandfather's not one of them. My grandfather, I think, would be dominant in today's era, in his era, in any era. And I think the only problem that would come with fighting today is that you got people like Tyson Fury who are, what is he, 6'8", something crazy. And then he weighs almost 300 pounds. So you didn't have that back in those days. You did not have that. He is like a dinosaur, Tyson Fury. So, I mean, that would be the only problem, but I still think that my grandfather would be dominant in any era of boxing.
And Rasheeda, what do you think about that? Do you think he would be just as dominant today or even more dominant than he was back then?
I think I agree with Nico. I think, even with the Tyson Fury, who I think is amazing, I think my dad, would be able to handle him. My dad was very, very good at handling not just the skill, but he was really good at mentally challenging his opponents. And he was the fastest heavyweight that I've ever known. So I think Nico's right. I do think with the social media and the coverage that my dad could get, I think he'd be even greater. But not only will they capture his boxing, but also they would have captured his humanitarian work all over the globe. We all know he's done some great things with his fame, and he's helped a lot of people. So I think now with the social media, they would have been able to capture all the great things that my dad did out of the ring.
Are you still a big follower of boxing, or are you more just in it for Nico's fights and your both of your son's fights and in terms of just combat sports? And also, like, where do you feel as though we're talking so much about how the sport's evolving? Where do you feel as though the sport has gone and will continue to go?
Well, right now I'm exclusively watching Nico and Biaggio, but I really started really getting into boxing with Mike Tyson. So I started watching him because he was so incredible and dynamic. Um, I love watching Canelo. Of course, Fury and Deontay Wilder, they're just incredible to watch. I'm a huge Manny Pacquiao fan. So I'm selective with, the kind of boxers, I watch. I tend to watch people who are entertaining and resilient. But I think boxing, because it's such an older sport, I think it will always have the luster that it always had. And I think, I miss my dads, and I miss the Foremans and the Fraziers and the Listons. Those guys, those were, to me, they were like Spartans. So I miss those kind of fighters who never said no to a fight. So nowadays with new school boxing, some boxers feel like, oh, they want to keep their record clean. They'll say no to certain opponents. And I really like the old school boxers that never said no to a fight. So, but yeah, I think it's going to continue to evolve, and I think it's going to continue to do very well.
I mean, and one of the people that is squarely in the conversation when we're talking about boxing, Nico, is Bob Arum, who is now helping promote you. I mean, what has it been like to know him and to work with him? And, what have you learned from being around him?
He's amazing. He's a boxing encyclopedia. It's a blessing that he's still around and as healthy as he is, because he was my grandfather's promoter. Like my grandfather was his first promoted fight, and now he's promoting my first fight ever. So it's like it's crazy that he's still around. I'm so happy to be with him, to be with Top Rank. But I'm extremely loyal to him. I've learned so much from him, and I wouldn't have wanted to be with any other promoter or company to start my career off, to like get into boxing. So it's perfect. And Top Rank, all those guys, they show me so much love.
I did want to ask about Top Rank because it seems to be the future of it seems to be muddy in terms of who's trying to buy it, who's not. I mean, what do you have any insight into what is going on with Top Rank?
I have no clue what's going on the business side, but I do know that, like, with Showtime just going out of business, or not going out of business, but like leaving, like not going into boxing anymore. So now I heard Al Heyman is signing with Amazon. So Amazon's going to be having fights, which is crazy. But we're in a new era of boxing where anything's possible. They were talking about Netflix having fights, which is just insane. But like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with boxing. I don't know what's going to happen with Top Rank. I just know that with the way the world's going now, with social media and everything, we've got more opportunities to make bigger fights and to get more viewing on the fights that are made. So I think boxing's in a good place.
Yeah, no, I don't think that would be crazy because I think that's actually something that Netflix is trying to do in terms of live sports. They're airing like
I heard it.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's wild. Like I can't believe it. But like who would have thought Netflix, picking up boxing? I think it'd be super cool. I think it'd be super cool. It'd be different, and you'd grab so many eyes that people who don't watch boxing. There's people who don't watch sports at all who are on Netflix. So it'd be cool.
Yeah, I think also it's, I mean they're streaming like an exhibition tennis match in March, but I mean I feel as though boxing would be the sport. I don't know what it is, maybe just the aesthetics of it. I think that would be the sport that would most fit on
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Netflix and not any of these other sports that they might want to try to stream. So yeah,
Everyone
it's
wants to
definitely a very
watch boxing. Everyone wants to
Mhm.
watch boxing at some point. Like I've seen it. Like I've seen celebrity matchups and this and that. Whenever there's two people who don't get along, what do people want to see? They want to see them fight. And so they throw boxing gloves on them and put them up together. And I'm not just talking about like the mixed match fights, but I'm talking about like boxing. When people start watching boxing, if you put someone who's never watched a sport, never watched boxing, and get them to watch Fury Wilder 3 for their first fight, they're going to be a boxing fan. So that's how you grab eyes, is because the sport is amazing. You just need people to view it just one time, and then that's all it takes.
if you ran your own promotion, both of you, frankly, what would be one thing that you would do, because with a change that you would like to see, that if you had your own promotion, like that you would put into play to grow the sport of boxing and to get more exposure for the fights.
I actually concur with Nico. I do think the streaming platform is the way to do it. Like, the Hulus, the Amazons, the Netflixes, they're coming on board and partnering with these promoters. It's bringing the world to boxing in a big way. And again, it's introducing boxing to a world of people who may not ever watch it or may not be interested in watching it. Now hey, I have a subscription. I'm gonna check it out. So I would do that. I would open up the medium, the platform to be able to watch it.
I know exactly what I would do. I know exactly what I would do. I would. I don't know how this would work. I don't know if this would even work, but I would give everyone a free fight. Like, so if there's a big pay-per-view coming up, if there's like Canelo versus like David Benavidez and Canelo is a huge boxing fight. That hasn't been made yet, but if that were to happen, I'd give everyone one free fight to watch. And I think if a casual viewer gets to watch a fight for free on Netflix or whatever, then after that free fight, they will end up spending money on the subscription, on the pay-per-view or whatever, because all you need is one really good fight to lock people in, and then they're like set. And you almost trick them to loving boxing just by watching one fight.
Yeah, classic marketing tactic. You know, give a little
Yeah,
bit away, and then they want they're gonna want more.
that's
But
right.
no, I think it would be really cool to live in a world again. I mean, I wasn't alive when but I've heard that they used to have boxing on like on the network television that you could watch it. You'd go to a bar and watch the boxing match, which is sounds so crazy to me. I mean, nowadays, but that would be a cool world to live in where
Yeah.
it was on a major network, and then like you said, then you watch it, you enjoy it, it's a great fight, and you want to move on and watch more fights. That's sort of how it works. So I want to ask you guys one more question both before I have some poll questions I'm supposed to ask you, some fun little multiple choice questions. But Rasheeda, your father, he was really well known for his humanitarian work and also really well known for his skills in the boxing ring. Now, you said that he wanted to be known, more for, or actually, you know what? I'm not quite sure what you said that he wanted to be remembered for. What did he want to be remembered for? Being a humanitarian or being a boxer?
You know what? My dad was known for both, but he wanted to be known for being a good, caring, kind, loving person. That's what he wanted. But he ended up being known for both. Um, I know boxing was near and dear to his heart, but what was even more dear is that he wanted everyone to take the love that people had for him and give it to others and share it with others. So I know for a fact my dad wanted to be known for his service to others, the love
How do
he
you
gave to others.
want him? How would you want him to be remembered?
The same thing, because that's the way he was to us. And that's what he passes down, like he inspires us to do the same thing. And I think that's really ultimately going to be our success in life, is how we treat other people.
I totally agree with that. That's a sentiment I think a lot of people watching would share, and it's an important one. And again, just one more for you, Nico. That just looping back into boxing. What advice would we've talked about? What advice you would give to promotions out there and to testing? We've talked about your advice in a lot of different fields, but in terms of a young boxer trying to get into the sport, or a kid who, watches one of your fights, says, I want to fight, growing up, I want to be a boxer. What advice would you give someone trying to break into the field?
Um, I would say it sounds dumb, but I would say try. I mean, not try to lose, but try to see what happens after you lose. I lost my first amateur fight, so after my first amateur fight, because I got beat up and I fought a really tough guy, really good guy. After that first amateur fight, I knew I was like, okay, I want to be champion, because taking a loss, getting beat up your first time out sucks. It's a terrible feeling. And I was young. I was like 15. So, see how you get through any sort of defeat. It doesn't have to be a real loss, but any sort of defeat, any sort of challenge, I would say.
Yeah, that's actually very good advice. And obviously the disappointment I think is a lot of the times what fuels people to be so great. So I think that there's a lot of validity in that statement. I do want to get to these poll questions that people are voting on, and to get your answers and see how they match up with what the folks out there are saying. So the first question is, which heavyweight boxer looks likely to possess Muhammad Ali's abilities? The first answer is no boxer, and then there's Tyson Fury and Mike Tyson. For you both, what do you think in terms of a boxer that might be able to possess the abilities of Muhammad Ali?
No boxer.
No, Bob.
I think that was I would have put my house on you guys both saying that, but yes,
Yeah.
I think I would agree with that as well. what if Muhammad Ali were in a comic book, what superhero, or excuse me, if he were a comic book superhero, what superhero could he defeat? And the questions or the responses here: Superman, Thor, or Batman? Which of these do you think he would really slug around in a boxing ring?
Superman.
I think,
He already beat
people
him.
don't talk about it. People don't talk about it enough, but Batman's just a normal guy. He doesn't have any,
He sure
Superman
is.
is,
I mean, if we want to get into it, in the Superman, like in that little comic strip, Batman was in the crowd watching my grandfather beat up Superman.
He
So
sure was.
yeah,
He
Batman's
sure
human.
was.
and it's because
Batman,
he's just,
Batman, Batman bought a ticket to my dad's fight with Superman.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that's just because he's a guy, he puts on his clothes there and he just tries to go out and be a vigilante, but
Yeah.
he doesn't have any superpowers. So, Nico, and your mother obviously can answer this as well. But if you were not a boxer, the questions here: what would be a good profession for Nico Ali Walsh? A model, being an MMA fighter, and a businessman.
Businessman. I would never be a model, and I'm not being an MMA fighter.
That's easy.
Well, I mean, you're already
Business.
halfway there. You've got an OnlyFans, so you could be a model, I guess. Rasheeda, if there was a Hollywood actress to play you in a potential biopic, the options here, which actress you think would be best? Jessica Alba, Kerry Washington, or Halle Berry?
Halle Berry.
Uh,
Oh,
Halle
I'm not
Berry.
supposed to answer, am I?
No, you
Sorry.
No,
can,
you can
Nico.
answer.
Yeah,
Halle Berry.
I was actually thinking of someone else, Rosario Dawson, but with that list, Halle Berry.
Halle Berry.
I
Yeah.
think that's a good.
Yeah.
I think that's a good answer. And then finally, what athlete in their respective sport, in this day and age, would be most paralleled with Muhammad Ali? Do you think it's Michael Jordan in basketball you can most parallel with Muhammad Ali, Tom Brady in football, or Novak Djokovic in tennis?
Michael Jordan.
I was gonna say Michael Jordan too, just because he's he's one of the most iconic sports figures. So you have to pick someone iconic. When you see a number and you think of a person, that's how you know someone is iconic. Every time someone sees 23, I know they're thinking about Jordan.
And Michael changed basketball. He had people watch, me included, who never liked basketball. So he changed the face of basketball for sure.
That his legacy was insane, and like you said, I mean, Nico, it's crazy when a team will retire your number when you never played for them, which I still think is the most ridiculous thing. Jackie Robinson excluded. Jackie Robinson can have his number retired by every team in baseball. That makes total sense. But the Miami Heat retiring Michael Jordan's number when no other team did it, it makes no sense to me still. But that is the impact that he left. You see that number. Yeah. It's crazy. We do have some questions in the chat here that I want to pass along before we get out of here. One person asks, Nico, how many times a week do you train, and in terms of boxing and in the gym, and what is, are you lifting weights, or are you just boxing? I mean, what's your training regimen look like?
Average 6 times a week. Saturdays are the easiest days. Saturdays, I would say running 3 to 4 times a week, and then lifting maybe twice a week, but 6 days a week. Okay. So it would be Monday through Saturday, sometimes Sunday. But if I'm working out on Sunday, it's small boxing stuff, nothing crazy.
All right, that's more than I work out. So thanks for making me feel bad. Rasheeda wanted to ask what someone in the chat wanted to know what Nico was like as a kid and what values you emphasized as you raised him.
Okay, so Nico was a mass negotiator. So first of all, he was the comedian. So he made us laugh when we were down and whatever, he was always like making us laugh because like, he always had the ability to put a smile on our face. Even when I was mad at Nico, I would have to laugh right in the middle of arguing. Also, if he got in trouble with something, because he was very calculating, when he got in trouble, he would, and when I would just sentence him to something, he would talk his way out of the sentence. And he would actually make sense. So I always thought Nico was going to be an attorney because he could talk his way out of anything. And it worked. So I was like, okay, fine, I get that. He was always very analytical. He was always thinking, very intelligent. I mean, he was always very, very funny and likable.
All right, another question for you, Nico. Speaking of your childhood, someone wants to know what 5 words you would use to describe your childhood.
Fun, explosive, sneaky.
I feel like you're trying to spell a word here. You got FES.
Oh, I do? Oh no.
I don't know. I was thinking, I was hoping it would fold into a nice acronym. So,
An
but no, I
acronym?
don't.
Yeah, no, I don't. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I would say not only fun but funny and innocent.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Those are good words. Yeah. Also someone here wanted to know what you found or what you find challenging about boxing and how you overcome it.
The most challenging thing about boxing. I think the most challenging thing about boxing is boxing helps with like life. So it's not just like boxing. It like makes you really think. Like I know a ton of boxers who start getting closer to like their religion and their spirituality because when you realize it's like you and another person who's basically trying to kill you or legally knock you unconscious, that like you get close to something. And so I would say the hardest part about boxing is the mental side of it, but that's also the best part about boxing. And I would say you overcome any sort of doubt just by it sounds stupid, but like believing in yourself. I mean, fake it till you make it. That's what I would say. In your own head. I'm not saying go out and be annoying and brash and bold and then get knocked out. Fake it in your head.
That's good advice coming from Caucasian Clay himself. It's
Caucasian
been a real
Clay.
pleasure to chat with you guys both. Seriously, it's I learned a lot. I think we all did, and not only about the sport of boxing and your family's lineage and legacy, but as you guys all both as individuals who have done so much in your own right, and really carried on the legacy of Muhammad Ali. So we just want to thank you both for being here on the ES Fancast, and yeah, I mean it was it was a real pleasure chatting with you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on, Kenny and ES Sports. You guys are amazing.
All right, well, that'll do it for this edition of the ES Fancast. I've been your host, Kenny Ducey. We really appreciate you guys being here with us, and we are always trying to give you guys an insight into your favorite sports and fans. So favorite sports and favorite athletes for you, the fans. So we appreciate you being here once again, and we'll see you next time. So long.